Welcome back. Today we are covering a movie called Two Can Play That Game. You'll have to listen to the soundtrack because the music in this slaps. Shanté Smith considers herself an expert when it comes to men. She knows what a woman should do to get the results she wants with them. She briefly leaves work to go home and check on a friend who's staying with her. On the elevator, a fugly man be staring at her junk. Shanté is a senior ad executive, and she's confident she'll always get what she wants. Her friend Karen fell in love with a bucktooth man named Michael. She changed him for the better, but even in his after, he was still built like a before picture. His confidence grew, and eventually he started making excuses about marriage. So Shanté made Karen break up with him. Her other friend Tracy knows her boyfriend is cheating, yet she hasn't caught him yet. He says men should be allowed to look at other women. Meanwhile, another friend named Deidre has to live with her jobless and broke-ass boyfriend. But Shanté considers herself lucky because her boyfriend is golden. So she gives him a surprise visit, and right after his meeting, they totally do the nasty in his office. She and Keith fell in love the first time they met. They were both attracted to each other, so it didn't take long for the sparks to fly. Keith's best friend Tony knows juices flow down in the office, but Keith denies it at first. Then he admits that there's nothing in the world that can make him leave Shanté. Another hot chick named Conny shows up, and Shanté says hi, even though she doesn't like her. She knows that Conny is a flirt and will do anything to get the man she wants. Yet it doesn't bother her that Conny has a meeting with Keith because she trusts him. I don't know, girl. Gabrielle Union is fine as hell. I wouldn't be trusting the trifling hoe though. Shanté loves that Keith is very accomplished and has a very successful career. Shanté's friends listen to her advice because they've proven her plans to work every single time. She's also taught Tracy how to know if her boyfriend is cheating. Shanté also knows a cheater's top lie is that they are working late. It's not a secret that Shanté's friends envy her relationship with perfect boyfriend Keith, so they understand when she can't go with them because she's spending time with her mans. Surprisingly, he calls and says he'll be working late that night. She knows it's a guy's number one lie if they are cheating, but she tries to play it cool and decides to go out with her friends. They all have dinner, and most of her girlfriends think Shanté knows everything. Monique clocks they asses though, and is hesitant on agreeing with everyone. Her girls notice Keith dancing at the club with a beautiful woman when they are all expecting him to be at work. So as not to stir gossip, Shanté brushes it off and walks to Keith and the new girl. She nicely says hi to the two, making Keith panic and causing him to go home right after. Shanté lies to her friends and says she knows Keith would be there with a coworker. She knows her girls would talk and panic if they think something's up. Monique says she would have slapped both the hoe and the her man. Tony doesn't believe that Keith didn't have any intention of sleeping with Julia when he took her out. Keith explains that they were working late, so when she asked him to eat out, he agreed. Eventually, Keith admits that he lusted after Julie. Knowing it's his fault, he wants to call Shanté and explain, but Tony tells him to wait the next day when Shanté's not that mad anymore. Meanwhile, Shanté has already started her 10-day program to get back at Keith and make him behave. This is why I don't date anymore. People be playing too many games. Also, I'm like 60 years old and fugly as hell. On day one, Shanté doesn't answer right away when Keith calls. When she finally does, she rushes him off the phone and asks to meet him later that night. Tony is worried because it's evident that Shanté knows what she's doing. Because Shanté is calm and composed, Keith follows Tony's advice and admits that he was wrong to go out with Julie. Shanté says she understands, but then she breaks up with Keith and asks some time apart. Then she offers to pay the bill. Keith is taken aback, but he pretends it doesn't bother him. Then he says he'll pay for the meal. Tony says the dinner has given Shanté a psychological advantage. On day 2 and 3, Shanté spends time with her girls, knowing very well that Keith is bothered with the breakup. Keith keeps calling her, but Shanté never picks up the phone even when Keith offered to take her to a concert. Instead, Shanté goes to church and sings her heart out. Meanwhile, Keith does everything he can do to distract himself, yet fails terribly. When Shanté sees some of Keith's friends at church, she knows it's the perfect chance to put her plan into action. She pulls a guy named Trent into a long and tight hug, making sure people can see. As she's expected, the news reaches Tony and he tries to play it off, explaining it was nothing more than a Christian hug. But the others believe that Trent and Shanté are flirting with each other. Shanté knows there's a possible backlash, but she's satisfied that Keith bombards her with calls one after the other. On day 4, Keith looks like hell. He doesn't have any energy to do anything or go to work. Tony says he looked like he didn't even wipe his ass. Shanté still insists on not talking to him to have the upper hand. Unfortunately for her, Keith comes over looking so fine. Keith argued with her and managed to transfer his frustration to Shanté, flipping the situation in his favor. On day 5, Keith gets to brag about the night before. He knows that he got to transfer his negative energy to his ex. That's why he's feeling a whole lot better, leaving her feeling bad. He and Tony celebrate that the argument made Shanté confused. On day 6, Tony takes his friend to a club to flirt with the ladies. Conny dances sexy and dirty with Keith, and a couple of times Keith had to grab her hand to stop her. He tells Tony he's not yet ready to be with someone else, even though he admits that Conny's beautiful. Tony insists that Conny wants Keith, and that Keith should start dating other women to get over Shanté. Tony says Keith need to smack Conny's ass. Shanté also goes on a few dates in one night to distract herself. One of them looks sussy, while another looks like a beanbag. She doesn't like her dates but has to see other people because it's part of the 10-day program she created. On day 7, Karen announces that her boyfriend, Michael, finally proposed to her. She reveals she owes it all to Shanté's 10-day program. Shanté is happy for her friend, but she can't steer away from her goal. So she goes shopping, gets her nails and hair done. Then she picks a dress that hugs her body before showing up at Keith's house unannounced. Damn, Vivica A, beautiful AF. Shanté says she came over to drop off Keith's things, then she'll be on her way. She tells him she only wants closure and nothing more. Keith can't resist and asks her to come inside. He says they're just going to talk, but they end up making out on the couch. Shanté knows it would end up like that, and she lets it go on until he's hooked. Then when Keith is so into it, Shanté leaves him hanging and excuses herself. She apologizes for leading him on and says she has to go home. On day 8, Tony expresses disappointment that Shanté once again managed to flip the script. He insists it's all about power and that Shanté is winning. Keith can't care less, and he says he'll just call his girl and fix things with her than to play the game. Honestly, all this gaming is why relationships don't work. The next day, Karen talks about how on day 7, she was able to get Shanté's plan to work on her man by leaving him with blue balls. Monique says she ain't never gonna do that because she doesn't like eggplants going to waste. Shanté knows the remaining 2 days are crucial and she has to get Keith back before she moves on to someone else. However, there are changes at work and it will definitely affect her 10-day program. Tony reminds Keith that he's a player, and instead of moping around and thinking about Shanté, he should accept Conny's offer to be her date. The pep talk works and Keith thinks he has to show Shanté who she's dealing with. If Tracy Ellis Ross ever saw Tony like this, I don't think Blackish would have happened. On day 9, Shanté invites her friends to the Miller Draft extravaganza. She tells them to have fun and to also be on their best behavior because her boss is also there. The venue is packed with people, and she's surprised to see Conny walk in with Keith as her partner. Keith pretends he doesn't know Shanté, and he does everything so as not to look at her. Shanté is disappointed because she expects that Keith will be begging for forgiveness and not go on a date with another woman. When she confronts him, Keith explains that he's finally testing the waters since he hasn't been able to talk properly to Shanté. He insists that he didn't know she'd be at the event. Because Keith says he's tired of her, Shanté talks to Conny about the situation, calls her a hooch. Conny gets offended. She says she didn't force Keith to come with her and that it's his decision. Conny thinks they should have a cheerleader off. Shanté gets so angry that she imagines punching Conny in the face, but she knows that it's still a professional setting and she doesn't want to make a scene. So she just walks away. Shanté's friends finally realizes that Keith and Shanté are having problems when they see him dancing and flirting with other women. They want to defend Shanté and take matters in their own hands, but Shanté tells them she can handle it herself. Deidre is so close to punching Keith, but Karen and Tracy manage to stop her. We all need a girl like Monique in our lives. Shanté is so embarrassed, but she knows she can't back down now that she's on day 9. As part of her plan, Shanté fakes a flat tire to get a man to notice her. 2 of the men that stop are ugly AF. Then one stops looking like Johnny Bravo with the jaw of Jay Leno. She takes him inside and makes sure that Keith can see them. Keith notices the new guy, Calvin, but he doesn't back down and instead gets Conny to dance sexy with him. Keith gets worried when Shanté listens intently to Calvin, even taking him inside the house to find a quiet place. He follows them inside and confronts Shanté, saying that she's flirting with Calvin just to make him jealous. To rile him up even more, Shanté drops a condom for Keith to see. Tony tries convincing Keith that the condom means nothing because Shanté will surely not use it. But because Shanté slept with her on their first date, Keith knows there's a possibility that she'll sleep with Calvin later that night. For his last resort, Keith tells Shanté that she can't leave the party with Calvin. He warns that he'll take Conny home if Shanté leaves with the guy. She knows this is how it would end, but she's willing to take the risk to win the game, so she decides to call his bluff. Before Keith loses control, Tony reminds him that he has the choice to get over Shanté and find something new. Shanté expects to see Keith waiting for her in her house because she believes her whole plan worked, so she's disappointed when she comes home to an empty house. On day 10, Shanté finds herself drinking at the club alone. She finally realizes that her 10-day program is still flawed because there are no rules in love. A woman approaches her, mentioning a guy who keeps on talking about his ex. To Shanté's surprise, she finds Keith moping and drinking. She copies his lines from the first time they met, thinking she'll get the results she wants. Then she asks him if her plan to get him back worked. Keith doesn't like the games and thinks Shanté's plan didn't work on him. However, he admits that he loves Shanté, and that is what will bring him back to her. They kiss and make out on the dance floor, both satisfied that it all worked out in the end. What did y'all think of this one? I honestly got tired of the back and forth, but still enjoyed it back when it originally released. Yes, I'm an old fucker.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.